BMC software. Our featured speakers today are Nick Packnos and Neil Blagrave. Nick directs the product management team for BMC's mainframe solutions. Nick has directed the team that developed and brought to market 5 new mainframe solutions in the past 3 years, helping customers save millions with lower software costs. Nick developed the strategy behind BMC's initiative to help lower MLC. Neil is the principal product manager for BMC's mainframe cost and performance optimization suite of products and is responsible for its strategic direction. Prior to joining BMC Software, Neil served as the technical manager for the database administration and quality assurance teams at Air Canada and was a solution integration consultant for IBM Global Services. Today, Neil and Nick will share the newest proven techniques for lowering your monthly mainframe costs. With our introductions complete, Nick, I will turn the presentation over to you.
Well, thank you, and good day, everyone. This is Nick Packnos, and as the title suggests, we're going to talk about managing your monthly licensing charge costs, at the same time optimizing the mainframe. Quite frankly, in our business, you can't do one without doing the others, and why is that? When you think about today's world, between mobile devices, smartphones, Facebooks, I mean, you name it. There are so many different ways that people basically interact with IT. Despite the many, many, many different ways, 91% of all transactions eventually will hit some piece of the mainframe. Think about that for a second. Even if you're using your smartphone to take a picture, for example, of a check to deposit, at some point, that check is going to go into most probably a mainframe-related database. So even though the world around the mainframe has changed really significantly, at the end of the day, that mainframe still dominates as far as the one platform that is essential to complete business transactions. Now, at the same time, despite the fact that transaction volumes are increasing significantly for the reasons I just mentioned, I don't know of anybody out there whose mainframe budget is growing to keep up with it. In fact, many, many, many mainframe budgets are shrinking. And the irony is that you have to manage the increased transaction volumes, lower budgets, while remaining globally connected. For those of us who have been in this business for a while, we used to have things like maintenance windows. It used to be very, very predictable when we used to have our peaks and valleys of processing. That's gone now. People want to access your mainframe all the time. And if they can't, your business immediately suffers. So you've got a significant series of problems in terms of increased volumes, mainframe going up, mainframe budgets going down, and connectability being wanted from every one of your customers. So let's now take a step back. This is about mainframe costs and what does drive mainframe costs. Some of the stuff you would expect, hardware, the people who manage it, IBM's one-time charge software, ISV costs like BMC's. You know, we take up a good amount, but the biggest piece of the mainframe cost pie is monthly licensing charge software, which you pay for ZOS, DB2, IMS, KICS, MQ. That could be 30%, and in many cases, much more of your mainframe budget, and that is going up every year. So at BMC, we've developed a strategy of a series of products to be able to go after that segment of the market to help you basically lower your costs, because we think that will have the most dramatic effect. So we're going to have a polling question right now that I hope that you can basically address. What is your biggest challenge in lowering mainframe cost? Is it MLC costs are not transparent and they're hard to quantify actual cost savings? That's one. Is it that using capping as a cost reduction technique can lead to performance issues? Is the challenge you can't consolidate or move workloads because of technical restrictions? And finally, is the challenge you have a general concern for impacting critical workloads or SLAs? We'll stop and let you basically answer this polling question for a second. and we will get the results to you in about 30 seconds or so. So as you're basically answering those questions, and we thank you if you are, there are a series or segments of cost management activities you should take. First off, you have to know what's driving your costs. If you can't foundationally understand what's driving your MLC costs, or any one of your costs in the mainframe, you can't be successful at lowering those costs. You have to know what's causing the costs to go up. So cost driver awareness is the first step in a maturity model for MLC cost management activities. The second step is dynamic workload capping. Once you know what the costs are, if you know you've got any, say, lower priority work, could you cap that workload to save money? Moving ahead, you want to optimize your subsystem licensing charges. You want to basically be able to take what you can and move workload around to save you money and optimize where those subsystems are. And then talking about workloads, you want to optimize workloads. You want to do the things so those business critical workloads that have to run on your system, that they are optimized as much as they possibly can be to lower costs. And then finally, obviously, contract negotiations and strategies. Now, that's out of the scope of this WebEx today, but certainly encourage you to get subject matter experts to help you in contract negotiations. So I do see that there is a results in from the survey, and I'll tell you these right now. On A, MLC costs are not transparent. 23% of you answered that question. B, using capping is a cost reduction technique and the risks. That was 27% of that. Cannot consolidate or move workloads was the lowest one at 14%. And the highest was a general concern of impacting critical workloads at 36%. So that was the biggest inhibitor to having your costs go down. And I think you'll hear today a lot of information how you could lower those costs without impacting that business critical workload. At least I hope you will. So as we move forward, I talked about these 5 pillars within this presentation. The 4 pillars are going to be in scope and what we're talking about. BMC has basically developed solutions that address those pillars. They are BMC Cost Analyzer, BMC Intelligent Capping, BMC Subsystem Optimizer, and BMC Next Generation Utilities for DB2. Those are the products we're going to be talking about today. And now I'd like to introduce the principal product manager and a key person behind all of this technology, Neil Blograve, to talk about these specific solutions.
Thank you, Nick. Good afternoon and good day, everybody. So we'll touch on three primary techniques to help optimize your MLC costs. You see them listed here. So reporting and forecasting your MLC costs. You can't really manage what you can't see. You need insight. Improving your resource usage with capping. So capping is not a new technology. We all know that. But there are advances in the field that make capping more effective, more intelligent, and let you actually reap the benefits of capping whilst protecting your critical work. And of course, optimizing your MLC software license costs by optimizing and separating subsystems, so giving you more flexibility on how you lay out your major subsystems in your environment. So we'll touch on the first one, reporting and forecasting MLC. So understanding the drivers of your peak resource usage, understanding what's driving your 4-hour rolling average peak, and understanding even to the next layer down of which batch jobs, which started tasks are actually driving those peaks. Having that visibility lets you know what you can manage, lets you understand what you can affect, and lets you focus your attention on what's important. We take the next step forward so that you can forecast and track those MLC costs over time. From an IT technician's perspective, managing a budget isn't necessarily part of your job role, but having that big picture view of MLC costs, how you're trending to the end of the contract year or to the end of the true-up period is important as you're managing your environment, as you're managing your costs and your workloads, and understanding where you're in trouble and when you're not. And more importantly, and as this speaks to poll question A, being able to quantify any activities that you do in the environment to understand, is it worth doing it? So let's dig into Cost Analyzer a little bit. And also,
Neil, this is, so BMC Cost Analyzer, I understand that this is the screen that customers see at first?
It is. It's where we start. So it starts with cost transparency. Everyone has a spreadsheet. We understand that. By now, you've all translated your MLC cost, your peak forward rolling average, the SCRT report into your own spreadsheet, and you've input some costs. Even when you have a very sophisticated spreadsheet, and some do, you are limited into what it can show you. So we want to give you better insight, more drill down capabilities. So we start you here with a monthly summary view. This is a full month, but of course, we load the data every day, so this builds on a daily basis. And you can drill down into specific products. So we're turning performance and capacity management a bit on its head, looking at it from a product perspective, whereas before you were looking at it from a more from a technical hardware or operating system perspective. And we're spinning it around a little bit to give you more of a cost-aware perspective to your system. So here I'm selecting IMS version 13. It's one of the more expensive MLC products on this list, on this report. So now we can drill down to what are the workloads that are driving IMS version 13's cost. So now I've got down here to the service classes, and I've selected just the LPARs or running IMS, and I've selected the low importance work. So I can see very quickly which workloads, which service classes are driving my peak, and I can also look at it from different perspectives, workload by importance, by subsystem address space, or report class. So it lets you see very quickly, is this pattern of work normal? Am I seeing abnormalities in the data? And invariably, you have the question that...
So Neil, before you move on, you've just basically showed a fairly extensive visualization about, in this specific case, a specific workload, IMS. I know that we've talked to a lot of customers. It may take them a long time to set something like this up. What's the setup time for something like this? Is there a lot of work to get you to this point?
Actually, really, it's really a structured approach. We've been doing this for multiple decades. We'll process your estimate of data on a daily basis using our own utility. It loads into the database. It's all automated. And as soon as that data is in the database, it's visualized.
So you get this basically almost instantaneously?
Instantaneously.
Okay. So
we're not showing you in real time, but this is a very interactive tool. Within seconds, you're seeing this rendition of the data in a drill down perspective. So as we show this kind of information to our customer base, invariably some will ask, well, what is the exact job? What's the job that's in the peak in that service class? So we're drilling down into the next layer. Now it's still showing the same LPARs, and now we've surfaced the top consumers, the top utilizers in the system at that time, showing it to you from a cost perspective. So each job, each started task that's running during the 4-hour interval is being represented here by its cost factor, what it's actually contributing to the bottom line. You can change this instantaneously to CPU seconds, MSUs, even zip usage. So I'm going to go one layer down. So I really want to focus on one of the LPARs, the highest consuming LPAR that was contributing to the cost of IMS. That was LPAR ESAJ. And I wanted to see which jobs on the ESAJ were consuming the most low importance jobs that were consuming the most. And you can see the list here. So now you can see it, and you're asking yourself the question, well, so what? Well, now what if you were going to optimize or tune those jobs, or if you wanted to consider moving them out of the peak? And that's typically what a lot of customers want to do. They're looking at work that is running during peak. It seems to be a scheduled work, and maybe it doesn't need to be there. But it's contributing all the time to the peak. And you can see how it's contributing to multiple peaks during the month. But I want to move those jobs. So what if I want to understand if I ran that job at a different time, what would happen? So here's a simple in our what if planning capabilities to select the jobs, and I want to move them over by 6 hours. So literally take them out of the peak. So you can do that with any job, any started task, anything that's running. And we'll show the representation on the top part as the current picture, and the bottom part of the view is the after picture. And I've shifted it over by just 6 hours.
So Neil, just within a few what looks like relatively simple steps, with minimal setup, because you're taking existing SMF records, you were able to identify the job that was causing the peak, drilling down, and now drilling down into specific intervals and the effects of possibly moving that job out a few hours, or a series of jobs out
exactly.
a few hours.
Exactly. and quantifying the impact of moving those jobs. So we will holistically look at the change in the workload profile for that LPAR. The peak has changed, and we'll recalculate the MLC costs for IMS version 13, but also for all the other MLC products running on that CPC. And if you're using SysFlex pricing, for the other CPCs as well. So we'll look at it holistically across your entire Plex and give you the true cost, the true optimized cost of making that change.
So we've had a number of customers. So you just basically showed that, and you showed moving. You showed actually now on this screen how much money potentially could be saved. I know we've had a number of customers who said, well, I might be able to do that, but this may take me 6 months or longer to be able to set something like this up. And this really, with just minimal setup, you've done this almost instantaneously.
We've spoken with many customers that say, yeah, I can get to an answer, but it's taken me 4 to 5 weeks to get to an answer. And I'm not 100% sure about the answer, but it took me a long time to get there. As Nick just pointed out, you can get to this answer in a matter of minutes.
Okay.
Now, the other thing that you can do with batch jobs, for example, or workloads running during peak, is to optimize them or tune them. So we partner with Strobe to launch in context from Cost Analyzer directly into Strobe. And it's just a visual representation of how that launch manifests itself in Cost Analyzer. But we'll launch directly into Strobe, where you can use and exploit Strobe's capabilities to analyze and optimize programs that are running during peak. So again, you want to make sure that you're focusing your attention on what matters. And by having this launch in context, we can start with the peak interval that you're most interested in, and launching directly into Strobe in context. So you're looking at just the workloads that are running during that interval in Strobe's view of the world. You can then use Strobe and focus in on the key elements that you need to, and optimize only the work that's running during the intervals, the peak intervals. So again, you're focusing your attention on what's important, not tuning for tuning's sake, but tuning for cost optimization's sake. Now, the other reality that we see as we share this information with our customer base, it has to do with transparency. It has to do with subcapacity, quote unquote. Is it truly subcapacity? I'm still picking on IMS version 13 here. We're still looking in that same context as I shared with you before. And you can see here that I've selected all the LPARs that are running IMS. And you can see that the actual utilization of the IMS subsystems themselves, that's a unique view that we can provide to you here in Cost Analyzer, is minimal. And when I share this view with customers, they don't always realize that that's how MLC works. You see a lot of white space. That's the other work that's contributing to the cost of IMS. So what you want to look at and consider is consolidating subsystems, consolidating IMS to fewer LPARs in this case.
So just to recap, even though IMS itself is using very, very little in terms of resources, you're going to get billed at the white space amount. You're going to get billed the higher amount.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Now, I've narrowed our focus here a little bit more. Again, looking at ESAJ, as you see by the weighted bar, it's the primary contributor to the cost of IMS. But you can see that the IMS utilization actually on that LPAR is very, very small. It's almost peach fuzz, let's say, on a chart. So is it a candidate for consolidating onto fewer LPARs? And with Cost Analyzer's what-if capabilities, it's as simple as selecting the work to move, selecting a target LPAR, and selecting, actually determining what you want to do with the licenses on that LPAR. So in this case, I'm moving the license off ESAJ, and here's the result. Now, when we showed you that other chart before where all that white space was contributing to the cost of IMS, this is the kind of savings that you can realize when you consider workload consolidation. This is not trivial. This is almost $500,000 a year in this case. And we'll show you how a product that we've developed can actually help you realize those savings much more easily.
So again, it's not just, one has to be very, very aware of what's contributing to peak, and it's not necessarily the highest thing that's always going to deliver you the greatest benefit. In this case, IMS, which was using very little, but because of the nature of MLC, CASI understands that, and just by moving a little bit of a workload, you just showed significant savings. Indeed,
and the title of the slide is the cost benefit of worth the effort. We know, we understand it's not always easy, it's not always fun to start consolidating software, to move things around, to make changes in your environment, but understanding how much potential savings is available to you is information that you can use to understand, is it really worth doing? right? So as opposed to, for example, optimizing for optimization's sake or moving for moving's sake, you're optimizing because you will save a lot of money.
So now I think you're going to show us some newer features and functions that CASI has come out now.
Well, we've introduced, as part of looking at the holistic big picture, the MLC budget view. So we developed a dashboard that has 4 quadrants, and I'll start in the upper left. A view of your current year, as well as the overall contract length. That's current year being on the left-hand side, overall contract length being on the right-hand side. And the colors mean something. The colors, red meaning you're over budget, green meaning you're on target. And we're actually factoring in your actual versus plan, but we're also looking at it from a forecasting perspective. We're taking your historical data, looking at it from a shift perspective, a period perspective, and we're training it out, forecasting out into the future to let you understand, are you trending hot, are you trending cold? Are you trending on budget or not? And of course, as we go through it, the bottom quadrant shows the actual versus plan and the forecast in more detail, cost variance in the bottom right. And then the last quadrant above, I'll touch on in a minute, is a measure of how effective you are as far as managing your costs. So because it's a cost analyzer, because we want to give you more insight, there is the drill down capabilities. In this case, I'll go back to the upper left, to the buckets, the true up period, the true up view. And if I click on the red bucket, we'll drill down into the specific workloads that are actually causing your cost overrun. This is all done in a matter of seconds. So then you know exactly what's causing your cost overruns to manifest themselves. Now, when we developed this particular view in Cost Analyzer and talking with our customers, they told me, Neil, look, it's hard enough to manage the true up, and if you exceed what you budgeted for in the IBM contract, the penalties are significant. And now with the more involved contract, we can beg and borrow MSUs or capacity, MLC costs for the next year and bring it forward and or push money ahead. It actually makes it more complicated. So can we get a view of our buckets, our MLC buckets, we call it that, so that I can manage them better. So I know when I have to be more aggressive from a capping perspective or workload management perspective because I'm running too hot, and I'll run into a penalty by the end of the true-up period. So this gives them the view, gives you the view, the insight in what you need to understand from which workload is driving my cost. And finally, as I mentioned before, the cost efficiency rating. This is really a measure of your 4-hour rolling average versus your MSUs, your actual MSUs being used, and how well balanced they are, how well evenly matched they are. And it's a metric that you can use over time as you embark on your cost optimization journey, expecting that ratio to increase. The higher the number, the more cost-effective your MSUs are. And you can use this as a management tool, management ratio, KPI, to track your success over time.
So that's really great. So, I mean, in essence, to summarize, I mean, what you can do with BMC Cost Analyzer is you can identify the areas that are basically causing you the most pain. And then you can go through, I mean, you just a few, but you can go through a number of scenarios that shows the effect of changing workloads, moving workloads. We didn't show this, but you can actually have even a capping scenario. And you could look at workloads from every different iteration, as well as this executive dashboard you just showed, and have you set the foundation for saving money.
Exactly. And the fact, or the reality that it's so interactive and so quick, we've seen our customers just develop new ideas. You're in the moment, you're exploring ideas in the moment, and because it's so responsive, they can explore multiple ideas quickly, effortlessly, and even if it's a bad idea or it doesn't save a lot of money, move on. And it only took you a minute or two to figure that out.
So many customers have tried the idea of capping. In fact, we've come across most customers who've done that. And a lot of them basically have had less than desirable results. Many of them have capped aggressively, and they've hurt performance. And that's always really what we get the pushback is that, hey, capping sounds great, but if I cap wrong, I'm going to hurt business critical, so I might want to try different ways of reducing costs. So we have a new tool that I believe, as you'll tell us, Neil, basically allows you to be aggressive with your caps while alleviating the risks.
Well, exactly. You can see the bullets here. We want to do dynamic management of your capped environment. whether it be defined capacity, soft capping, or group capacity. We want to do it dynamically, do it intelligently. It needs to be aware of your critical work so that we're not impacting that. So again, you're concerned about SLAs. And you want to make sure that it's, you're doing it from you're balancing MSUs or capacity across LPARs and groups in such a way that you're not impacting your costs, you're optimizing your costs. The reality of capping is that it can often help you optimize your costs, but invariably, because of the SLA concerns, the SLA risks, you set your caps high. You set your group capacity limits high. They're there to catch runaways. So they're not truly there to optimize your costs, and that's the difference between what comes out of the box from IBM, which is obviously a very, very good tool. But to experience it from a cost optimization perspective is something a vendor like BMC would actually do. So the capping challenge, it's effective. It's a tool that you should use to help optimize and manage your MLC costs, but it is difficult to get it right. And if you do get it wrong, the penalty as well, it's scarring. The SLA hits, you get to do it once, you make a mistake, and you're not going to do it again, and you won't be allowed to do it again. Or you'll set the cap so high that it's, well, what's the point, right?
So tell us, Neil, so what is the answer with BMC intelligent capping? How does it alleviate the risk while letting you be aggressive?
So we're looking at it from a workload importance perspective, looking at it from holistically at your overall capacity, looking at how your LPARs are being used from a utilization and workload perspective, and we're determining on the fly what your optimal capping setup should be. And we're making those changes dynamically. We're interfacing with a hardware management console, and we're affecting those changes based on policies that you define, that you've configured for us to read, but also our own proprietary algorithms to determine what's the optimum cap setting. Okay, so how does it work? So we're looking at your 4-hour rolling average. We're looking at your utilization patterns, and we're looking at your workload importance. So we're looking at to see how the workload is behaving in your environment in real time. As I mentioned before, we're using that information to determine what the cap settings should be. And we're making those changes dynamically to the hardware management console. So you could do this manually. There are some customers that monitor this with their eyes on glass, and they do their best to react to a change that they're seeing in their environment, specific KPIs, and they're making those changes manually, but they can't react fast enough, especially if, for example, they're noticing queuing in their online transaction managers. They can't react fast enough to raise the cap, and now they've caused the SLA problem that we're trying to avoid. And we do this mostly from a zero-based perspective. So we're trying to manage your MSU allocations across your LPARs, across your groups, from a zero-based to zero-sum game perspective. So if we're sharing MSUs capacity from one LPAR to another to enable important work to get through versus low importance work, we're doing it such that we don't raise your cost. So how does this work? So in this case, I'm showing you the before picture. The LPAR 1 on the far left, it has a static cap, and high importance work is actually being capped, and that's not what we want to see. And the other two LPARs, if you see to the right, they have a degree of low importance work that actually should have been capped or could have been capped to allow the high importance work to get through without being impeded. So now the after picture. So what we do, you can see that the defined capacity settings on these LPARs is changing dynamically. And we've actually capped, you can see that in the gray space on the far right LPAR, we've actually capped some low importance work because you advised, you told ICAP, intelligent capping, that it can be sacrificed. It can be sacrificed to a certain degree. And in exchange, we've given that capacity to LPAR 1 so the high importance work can get through. The net benefit is that you're getting high importance work through, but you're doing so at the lowest number of MSUs or 4-hour rolling average possible. Now, capacity groups. Many of you have capacity groups. All your LPARs and a CPC are in one group, and that's a typical scenario that we've seen in many shops. But there are some limitations that come with capacity groups. As work is being capped, and you can see that on the upper right, where importance work is being capped, and then your LPARs the weights are actually frozen, and you don't have the flexibility that you would normally want to have in this kind of situation. So with intelligent capping instead, managing the LPARs within a group, so you have the actual flexibility of individually manage those LPARs within the group, so you can manage them effectively, independently, manage their MSU allocations more granularly, so you're not running into the constraints of group caps, while you still have the overall group cap umbrella if you prefer to have it that way. So it's an interesting way to consider capping LPARs in a more granular level while still maintaining your group caps. And so you can implement and in a very staged approach, start this way if you have group caps, managing the LPARs within a group, and being able to reap additional benefits that you couldn't do just with group caps alone. And now the ultimate is just managing the groups, the LPARs independently. So taking them out of the group and managing the LPARs with intelligent capping, managing them holistically across the plex, and optimizing their usage based on the workload importance. So you can see we're capping at certain times, we're giving capacity at other times. We're making sure that the high importance work actually gets through. We're actually making sure that low importance getting through at the lowest possible number of MSUs available.
So really, Neil, by the groups that we create, whether it's from individual LPARs or from groups, essentially critical work goes on, but wherever possible, capping all the low priority stuff and taking from those areas that have low priority. So we basically ensure that we save money and reduce risk, correct?
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. Now, one of the failings of a dynamic capping solution or option is if you don't have an awareness of how expensive those LPARs are, so an awareness of cost, you may inadvertently raise your costs even though you have a dynamic capping solution in place. In this case, we have an MSU limit or a maximum MSU amount that we want to strive for 500 MSUs. And we're actually, by doing that, we're actually saving 100 MSUs over just conventional static capping. But the challenge is if you've decreased low importance work in favor of high importance work on a more expensive LPAR, in this case LPAR 2, while you are still managing to the same number of MSUs in total, you've actually raised your cost. In this case, we've increased the monthly bill by over $2,000, which is not exactly what you wanted to do when you implemented the capping solution to begin with. You wanted to be smart about it, so intelligent about it. So we introduced MLC cost awareness. So having the LPARs, having ICAP, be aware of the relative costs of the LPARs. It's this patent-pending technology that we've introduced to make sure that our capping solution is actually the most effective on the market. In this case, intelligent capping understands that LPAR 2 is more expensive. It understands that there's low importance work on LPAR 1 that can be sacrificed, but it does so in a way that it doesn't give too much capacity to LPAR 2. It gives enough for LPAR 2 to have enough capacity to run the important work, but it doesn't take so much from LPAR 1 away that it gives too much to LPAR 2.
So this is really truly unique because obviously there's a technical aspect of capping high priority versus low priority. But ICAP is unique in the sense that it also looks and makes sure that your costs won't go up and will not take actions that will hurt you from a cost perspective.
Exactly. So you're reaping the benefits of capping and managing your workloads as effectively as possible using a capping technique, but you're also ensuring that you don't inadvertently raise your costs. So you're truly optimizing your MLC spend.
So tell me a little bit about, again, risk. Big concern with customers. I'm assuming even though we can say how great this product is, how do we implement it with minimal risk?
Well, we understand that capping raises concern with many customers. That's why you set your cap so high. And there are SLA risks in play. So we introduced a three-step approach. the observe mode, so the initial installation of intelligent capping, well, we're monitoring your environment in real time, and we're creating output in our audit log that you can view to understand what kind of workloads are running, what capping can be, what cap levels can be set, and use information in that audit log to help define your initial policy, the initial user-defined policy to help control or manage your capping strategy. And we move on to message mode. So with a policy in hand, intelligent capping will use that policy, and it will, again, in real time, interrogate the system, and it will issue commands to the audit log versus to the HMC. And so you get to see, understand over time, is it doing what you expect it to do? Is the policy actually performing as you would expect it to? Are there any critical workloads that might have been impacted based on that capping decision? And with that, in message mode, you get to refine your policy. You can fine-tune it, adjust it, set it a little higher so that you have more breathing room from an SLA perspective. And then when you're satisfied with that, put it in manage mode, which is actually turning the policy live. And ICAP will then, at that point, start issuing commands to the HMC to automatically adjust and dynamically change your cap levels.
So obviously you have ample time to eliminate the risk. One other thing is that we've talked about Cost Analyzer first. The other thing you could use Cost Analyzer. Cost Analyzer does integrate with capping to basically show you some of the parameters you can transfer across so you can set better caps. But let me point out, you do not have to have both products. These products work independently, but there is some semblance of integration between the two. So let's now talk about optimizing MLC software licensing costs. I mean, obviously that the way that MLC works, it really matters on how many LPARs you are on. So tell me a little bit about what we can do about that, Neil.
So I showed you earlier in the cost analyzer screens how IMS subsystems, for example, or any subsystem, is contributing to cost, and how that white space, all the other work, is actually driving your cost for DB2, CICS, et cetera. Typically, what customers have, they'll have CICS and DB2 on the same LPAR, same with IMS, and that is, well, it's partially a technical constraint, but also you could separate them if you chose to. There's an API that IBM provides, but it's very difficult to deploy, especially since it implies application changes. So what we've developed is a solution that lets you optimize how you lay out your subsystems. So we can separate CICS from DB2, CICS from IMS DB, or even IMS Transaction Manager from DB2. So giving you additional flexibility in how you lay out your subsystems, with the intent being that you'll pay truly for subcapacity, paying for what CICS is using, for example, versus paying for CICS and DB2 combined, and all that DB2 work, all of that DB2 batch, causing the cost of CICS to be exponentially higher than it actually needs to be.
So how does it work, Neil? How are you able to break apart, say, KICS and DB2 or IMS?
Well, see, we have an example here, but it's a typical, very, very simple layout. And what Sub-Zero actually lets you do is separate them like that. So you'll have Sub-Zero running on LPAR with CICS, and you'll have Sub-Zero running on an LPAR with the database engine, whether it be DB2 or IMS database. And what Sub-Zero is doing, it's intercepting the SQL or DLI calls, and it's routing that data access request to let's take DB2, for example. DB2 processes the request and sends it back to Sub-Zero on the CICS region, and Sub-Zero feeds the information back to the application. So it's completely transparent to the application. It doesn't know that it's talking to Sub-Zero, for example. The CICS application doesn't know it's talking to Sub-Zero.
So there's no application changes? No
application change whatsoever. And we're using documented IBM APIs. So this is all above board. We're not doing anything shaky here. It's all sound proven technology. We've actually vetted this with IBM to make sure that we're doing okay.
Okay.
So let's run through a couple of simple examples just to give you a better feel for the potential here. In this case, we'll consider an LPAR isolation example. So again, looking towards getting to a subcapacity type of layout. Here we have a very typical four-way data sharing, CICS DB2 running on 4 LPARs, all laid out the same. And the total cost, and we have the cost there because it's important to understand the cost benefit here, of approximately $336,000 per month. So with Sub-Zero, what we can let you do or allow you to do is actually break out CICS from DB2, have CICS running on its own LPARs with Sub-Zero, DB2 running on its own LPARs with Sub-Zero. And the net effect is significant from a cost savings perspective. You still have redundancy from a subsystem perspective, but the savings in this case from an annual perspective are $1.3 million. Not trivial by any stretch of the imagination. This is huge. This is a game-changing capability that lets you realize significant savings whilst using technology that is seamless to the application and actually makes a significant dent in the bottom line. So another example from a CICS DB2 data sharing perspective, again, similar layout as before. In this case, we'll maintain the data sharing flexibility. So you have CICS running on all 4 LPARs still. We've broken out DB2 on just 2 LPARs. We have CICS talking directly to DB2 on 2 of the LPARs. So you actually, for the high volume, high response time requirements transactions, those are running on those LPARs. The others are running through Sub-Zero. And here the savings a little bit less because you actually have DB2 and CICS still commingled on the same LPARs, but the net effect is still in the $400,000 range in this financial example. And you have more options available to you. When we again talk with customers on how they might want to deploy this, you actually get into a whiteboard session and you start thinking, well, what if I could do anything I wanted to do? What if I don't have to follow the old rules? What if I really want to break out my subsystems more effectively, either from a utilization perspective, performance perspective, and an application perspective? Can I do something different? Because now I can, and I'm not tied, I'm not handcuffed by the old rules that have been on the table for so many years. Now, one of the additional benefits of Sub-Zero is that you actually get some redundancy, some high availability capabilities. So Sub-Zero would, in fact, understand, for example, if DB2 was taken offline or abandoned on its own. And with a bit of automation, it'll start routing that traffic over to the other DB2. So you actually have, as far as, you still have redundancy in your layout, but now you have a high availability solution that is unavailable out of the box from IBM. So we're giving you additional flexibility. It's not a cost-saving capability, but it is an SLA high availability option that you now have available to you to actually deliver better performance, better availability to the business.
So just want to briefly mention before we wrap this up, first of all, there's a question out there that I'd like to address right now. I believe it's on capping. The question relates to a transaction that's causing high CPU in an application. Will the software intelligent capping bring down the CPU cost of that particular job? Yes, if it's a lower priority workload, you can set your policies. If you've got any low priority workload, again, you set the policy up that basically exceeds the cap, we will reduce that cap and we will let that transaction use less CPU. Same thing with batch. Many people use the ICAP solution, the intelligent capping solution, to cap low priority batch. Again, you set the policies, and we will take from areas from low priority work and give it to high priority work. So in essence, if you've got any transaction that's causing a spike, then that transaction is not business critical. You can use the capping tool to reduce both CPU and the cost for that. So I figured I would address that question that's on the chat window, or the Q&A window, I'm sorry. One thing I do want to mention before we wrap up, about a year ago, BMC acquired the assets from a company called CDB. And the reason we're mentioning this in a cost optimization seminar is that this technology allows DB2 to run much more efficiently and at a lower cost. We do this by having utilities that have much lower elapsed time, giving you greater CPU use, greater CPU use, far less CPU usage and far less DASI usage. In fact, the graphs that I show here, we've got a comparison between BMC's classic utilities and our new NGT utilities, and the NGT utilities use 70% less CPU, 66% less elapsed time, and 85% less DASI, because this is sortless technology. And it also provides near zero outage for your DB2 maintenance. So this is really significant. And because the technology runs so fluently, so quickly, uses such limited resources, and it provides zero outage, you have the ability of doing reorgs on a much more frequent basis. Rather than waiting for a big series of weekly reorg jobs, you can run almost daily reorg jobs because they will not use the CPU and they will not put an impingement on your system. And when you think about that, if you could run reorgs much more frequently, the performance of your business-critical DB2 assets will be much better, and you will save a significant amount of money. So we wanted to talk a little bit about this next-generation technology that BMC purchased. And when you think about this, if you think about the breadth of the BMC portfolio, not only do we have significant tools that directly lower the cost of MLC, we've got database tools that do the same thing, and in fact, we've got system management tools that do the same thing. Our systems management technology, Mainview, uses far less resources than the competing products. So the entire BMC mainframe portfolio can help you reduce your operating costs on the mainframe. And in fact, we've got a number of success stories. Neil, if you want to just basically mention three of them.
Well, we have a major insurance company on the East Coast that's considering R4, or we label internally R4, our cost optimization solutions. And they're very keen on moving forward with this. U.S. transportation company also on the East Coast, realizing savings. They're bringing their MLC costs back down to their 2013 levels, and realizing a 6-month ROI. So a smaller growing insurance company in the Midwest, also driving down their costs. The ROI that they're realizing in 6 months, and it seems to be a common refrain here, is key. It's important. It's important for you to realize that savings are real. Savings of 10, 20, 30% are very real when you combine the solutions together. And in our November 3rd webinar, a bit of a plug for what's coming up later, we'll drill into the details of these two companies and more. So the customer success stories, and we'll share with you how they realize those savings, how they use the products, how they leverage and exploit the products to their advantage to optimize and reduce their MLC spend.
Thank you. So with that, Janine, we are ready to take any questions that may have or will be out on the telephone. We are happy to address those at this point right now.
Great, Nick. Yes, we have quite a few. Do the BMC solutions come as a single package that you have to buy, or are they available as separate products?
We will allow you to do it either way. Each one of the products are designed to work separately, and you will see significant benefits because we recognize, as much as we'd like people have all BMC solutions, we recognize that's not possible. There are some integration points between the products that make them work well with one another. And there are also, quite frankly, if you have, for example, BMC's systems management solutions, Mainview, there is some integration between that and our capping solution. But by no stretch of the imagination do we force you to buy these as a package. You can buy them individually.
Okay, then I think this is a great follow-up question to that. If I was going to start with one thing to save money on the mainframe, which would give me the biggest bang for my buck?
What we have seen at BMC is we're amazed at how much low priority work is contributing to the peak 4-hour rolling average, or work that can be deferred maybe for an hour or two. And most of it is because the lack of visibility. Shops transactions happen so frequently. In a lot of cases, transactions and applications have been set up 10, 20 years ago for strictly performance reasons. And they may not be in existence now. What we strongly recommend is to use a solution, use Cost Analyzer, to first look and have a complete understanding about what is contributing to peak. If you don't know what's contributing to peak, then you may do a lot of work and you may have a limited effect on lowering your MLC. You really need to understand what is the biggest contributing factor to my MLC costs. So the first thing I would say is use Cost Analyzer.
Great. One of our attendees writes, this is great information. Are the installations, though, fast/simple?
Take that,
well, we make them as simple as possible. The one aspect that we have at BMC is a program. We have a program that we work with our new customers that helps them through the installation process. So direct line with product support, a program that we've implemented where we have checklists, guidance on how to proceed from beginning to end, making sure that the product is deployed correctly as efficiently and quickly as possible. We've been doing this for many years. We're using standard installation processes, obviously, that you're used to and comfortable with. But in conjunction with our product support program, we call it Amigo, it helps our customers realize the savings as quickly as possible.
And we also, one thing is that we have a group now, a larger and larger group, because we're the forerunners of a lot of this technology who completely understand MLC, how it works. And so not only can we basically provide assistance, and I think these tools are as easy to install as most of the Mainframe tools that are out there, but we also have the expertise too. Before we go to another question on the phone, I have a follow-up question on the chat, on the Q&A window. How does the BMC intelligent capping solution identify high priority, low priority workloads? Basically, by default, we work with IBM's WLM, the Workload Licensing Manager. So, in essence, right out of the box, it's got the intelligence to basically work and know what you've already set using WLM policies, high priority versus low priority. Of course, you can create your own policies on top of that. So right out of the box, the intelligence is built right into what's in the operating system, and we work very, very well with that and with the capabilities that IBM provides. Next question.
We're a smaller mainframe shop. Can we use these tools?
Absolutely. In fact, I would say that our best guess is about 95% of mainframe shops, even the small ones, are on some semblance of sub-capacity pricing. And I would have to say, unfortunately, for a lot of smaller shops, you've got one person jointly doing systems programming, capacity management, performance management, in some cases doing systems programming for DB2, for IMS, for KICS. To have the time to be able to really do a lot of the manual work to understand costs is a lot for one person. So again, I would think it would have just as much impact. I mean, on a relative scale, maybe not, but I mean, relative it would, because the MLC costs are still a big percentage of what it takes to run the mainframe. And so really, this could be a great complement to that small shop where maybe there are a limited amount or no capacity planning people, and we could work to basically lower your cost significantly. So I would say, yes, it works in every shop that's got some semblance of sub-capacity pricing.
Are the graphs and interfaces Java-based?
No. Sorry, I had to think about that for a minute. No. I'm not a developer, not a coder, so no.
How about, someone asked, doesn't IBM provide a free capping tool?
Yeah, and we work well. The IBM capping tool, and again, IBM provides great facilities on the mainframe, obviously. We're all mainframe bigots here, let's be honest. But, we make up for some of the deficiencies in the IBM capping tool in terms of, how we basically allow you to raise the limits when you surpass the caps. There are a number of feature functions that we do that IBM does not provide. And so this whole notion of allowing you to raise the caps in some cases, lower the caps in other places to basically reduce the MLC, IBM basically looks at capping and the ability to cap from a performance perspective. I mean, they will help you to ensure that maybe you don't clobber a business critical app. Although, again, if you get it wrong, you're going to basically do that. But we provide a greater level of granularity to set even a lower cap without basically reducing your risk of workloads.
Okay, one more. Is Subsystem Optimizer, that product, an approved method So in other words, does IBM approve of that?
Well, let's put it this way. The product has been out now for 2 years, and IBM has not said anything. And in fact, we have had IBM, thankfully, present at our executive forums, and we've gone to theirs. And so we would know certainly by now, 2 years later, if there was a concern. And Neil already mentioned, we use open APIs. There is nothing that we use contractually that would run afoul of IBM. We respect, again, we live in the mainframe, and we've got great respect for IBM. We would not do that. So there's nothing either contractually or from a technological perspective that we're doing. And again, we're using open APIs, so there should be no concern. And we have not heard any concerns from anyone, including IBM.
And again, to reiterate, our customers can exploit those APIs today, except that when they do it, they have to make changes to their application. And customers that have tried it realize how hard it is, and when they see what Sub-Zero can do, are champing at the bit to move forward.
I have another question on the Q&A window before we close. I know we have a minute left. Is ICAP, the ICAP, is it data captured by Mainview or a separate collector? Well, it is. This is based upon Mainview technology, but you do not need Mainview at all. So, when you think of it, BMC's been in this business for quite a while, and so we've had the semblance of this type of technology, whether it be the cost analysis solution, which a lot of it's based on our capacity planning solution, or the ICAP solution, much of which was basically taken from our Mainview solution. So we'd be kind of foolish to throw out good code. And so Neil, go right ahead, please.
I was going to say that the ICAP's intelligent capping framework is based on Mainview. So if you have Mainview today, it's a plug-in to Mainview. If you're not a Mainview customer, that's fine. We ship with a framework that allows you to have that single system image across your entire Plex, all your CPCs, and have that single pane of glass, single point of view into your capping environment. But again, you don't have to buy a Mainview to exploit and deploy intelligent capping. We'll ship with whatever basic framework you need.
And so I think we are over our hour.
You are right. That's all we have time for today. I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and I especially want to thank Nick and Neil for sharing their expertise. Early next week, we will be sending out a link to a recording of today's presentation to everyone on the call, as well as to anyone who registered for today's event but could not attend. That concludes our